Imagine for a second the absolute harshest, most lethal environment on our entire planet.
Right.
Like you are picturing just howling winds that can literally knock a grown person right off their feet.
Oh, yeah. The really brutal stuff.
Exactly. You're picturing crushing pack ice, freezing saltwater spray hitting you in the face.
Yeah.
Basically a landscape that is just fundamentally hostile to human survival.
Yeah, it wants you gone.
Right. Now, I want you to take that mental image and right in the middle of all that chaos, imagine you were sitting in this 247 square meter penthouse suite.
Unbelievable.
You are sipping a vintage champagne, and your private butler is quietly stepping into the room just to ask if the water in your wraparound terrace jacuzzi is currently set to your preferred temperature.
It creates this almost physical sense of cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
It really does. It just breaks my brain a little bit.
Because, we have spent well over a century being culturally conditioned by the Shackleton model of exploration.
Right, exactly. Man versus nature.
Right. We are taught from a very young age that accessing the absolute edge of the map requires immense physical suffering. I mean, you eat hardtack, you ration your fuel, you fight the elements tooth and nail.
You lose a few toes to frostbite.
Exactly, yeah. But the landscape of extreme travel has completely fractured. What we are examining today is an industry that has entirely decoupled geographic extremity from physical discomfort.
And the tension there is just fascinating to me. Like, how do you merge the totally unpredictable, violent reality of a polar expedition with the hyper-controlled, flawlessly manicured environment of a 6-star luxury hotel?
It's a massive engineering and psychological challenge.
It is, and that is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We have this extraordinary source document anchoring our conversation today.
I do, yeah.
We are looking at a really comprehensive 2026 guide compiled by travel advisor and cruise specialist Yvonne Jr. Blanchette from ARR Voyages. And he authored this guide to mark a major milestone.
Right, the 40th anniversary of the Scenic Group.
Exactly.
And the real value of this specific guide is that it absolutely refuses to just act as like a glossy promotional brochure.
Yeah, it goes way deeper than that.
Oh, way deeper. It treats these vessels as these massive floating engineering marvels. It really breaks down the mechanical realities, the regulatory nightmares, and just the sheer logistical friction of operating a luxury asset out in a hostile wilderness.
Which is so rare to see.
It is. It's a completely unvarnished look at the actual architecture of modern ultra-luxury exploration.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you really want to understand how we eventually arrive at a submarine-equipped super yacht floating around in Antarctica, we cannot start in some high-tech naval shipyard.
No, not at all.
We actually have to rewind all the way back to 1986, and we start with an Australian university accountancy dropout named Glen Moroney.
Yeah, Glen Moroney's origin story is, it's really the absolute bedrock of the ships we are analyzing today.
It's a crazy trajectory.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the heritage of most major maritime cruise lines. Historically, they were born from massive shipping conglomerates that are transferring their industrial knowledge over to passenger travel.
Right, like old cargo companies.
Exactly. Or they are started by these old aristocratic maritime families who have literally been building boats for generations.
They start with this deep, systemic knowledge of maritime engineering.
Yeah.
But Moroney, he starts in Newcastle, New South Wales, with a single coach tour bus.
Just one bus.
One bus. He literally abandons his accountancy studies, buys a bus, and begins running these tours along the Great Ocean Road down in Victoria.
And it's all grassroots.
Yeah, he builds his entire initial customer base through sheer word-of-mouth marketing.
And we really need to dwell on the logistics of what it means to run a land-based bus tour in Australia back in the late 1980s.
Oh, I can only imagine.
I mean, you are the driver, you are the mechanic, you are the tour guide, and you are the customer service representative, all at the exact same time.
Talk about wearing all the hats.
Right. So you are learning in real time exactly what causes friction for a traveler.
Like what annoys them, basically.
Exactly. You learn how long a person can sit in a seat before they get completely restless. You learn what kind of pacing a daily itinerary actually needs.
Right, when they need to eat, when they need a bathroom break.
Yes. And how to manage the variables of bad weather and mechanical failure, all while keeping the customer completely insulated from the stress of those failures.
That makes a lot of sense. So he isn't learning how to build a ship at this point. He is learning the psychology of the affluent traveler.
Precisely.
And that boots-on-the-ground education, it scales rapidly because by the early 90s, he has expanded into touring programs all across Australia and New Zealand.
He's growing fast.
Yeah, and you fast forward a decade, and he is orchestrating these massive, complex, worldwide touring programs.
Oh, huge networks.
We are talking about moving logistics networks through Canada, Alaska, South America, Asia. But the key detail here, and this is wild to me, is that he still doesn't own a single piece of maritime hardware.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, his lack of maritime hardware in those early years is actually his greatest strategic advantage.
Really? How so?
Well, by the mid-2000s, Moroney recognizes this massive demographic shift happening toward water-based travel.
Right, specifically river cruising in Europe.
Exactly. But instead of going to a bank, taking out massive loans, and trying to build his own shipyard from scratch, he simply charters existing river vessels from companies like Viking and Avalon Waterways.
He just rents them.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
He pays them for the use of their ships, but he fills those ships entirely with his own touring clients.
Let me stop you there because my instinct, just looking at that business model, is that he is leaving a ton of money on the table.
I mean, it looks that way on paper.
Right. If you are chartering someone else's ship, you are inherently paying their markup. Why not just build a ship immediately if you already have the client base to fill it?
Because chartering is the ultimate risk-free form of market research.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Think about it. When you build a ship, you are locked into the design decisions you make on day one for the next 20 years.
You can't just undo steel.
Exactly. By chartering Viking and Avalon hardware, Moroney could observe the European river cruise industry firsthand without carrying the immense capital risk of owning flawed hardware.
That is actually genius.
He literally watched his own clients interact with these ships. He listened to their complaints. He noted exactly where the cabin layouts felt cramped, where the dining service bottlenecked, and, where the viewing angles of the scenery fell short.
So he essentially used his biggest competitors as his own personal beta test.
Exactly that.
He waits, he catalogs all the pain points, and only after years of this intense observation does he finally move to create a proprietary solution.
The timing was deliberate.
Yeah. In 2008, Scenic launches its very first purpose-built river cruise ships. They call them the Scenic spaceships.
Which is a great name.
It is. And this introduces a massive disruption to the entire industry, which was the balcony river suite.
And, to understand why the balcony river suite was such a seismic shift, we really have to look at the severe physical constraints of European river cruising.
Yeah, it's not like the open ocean.
Not at all. Ocean ships can be built as wide and as tall as the naval architect's desire. But river ships are totally dictated by the landscape.
Because of the canals.
Right, they must pass through the Rhine-Main-Danube canal systems. That means they have to fit into these concrete locks that are precisely 12 meters wide.
12 meters? That's tiny.
It is. The ships legally cannot be wider than 11.45 meters.
So you have literally centimeters of clearance.
Barely any clearance. And furthermore, they have to pass under all these medieval bridges, which strictly limits their height.
So your canvas as a shipbuilder is effectively this very rigid, long, rectangular box.
That's all you get.
You can't just stick a balcony onto the outside of the hull like you do on a big ocean cruise ship, because the moment you enter one of those canal locks, the concrete walls would just shear the balcony right off the side of the ship.
Precisely. It would be a disaster. So, before 2008, the industry standard for a river cabin was essentially a small hotel room with a fixed picture window.
Like a fishbowl.
Basically. If you wanted fresh air, you had to leave your room and go all the way to the top deck.
Which isn't very luxurious.
No. So Moroney's innovation was this brilliant piece of engineering sleight of hand. Instead of building the balcony outward, they actually cut into the internal square footage of the cabin itself.
Oh, they brought the outside in.
Yes. They created this sealed sun lounge concept where these heavy glass panels could slide or drop down at the push of a button, instantly converting the internal seating area of the cabin into an open-air balcony.
You know, I look at that innovation the exact same way I look at the invention of the modern smartphone screen.
How do you mean?
Well, before that specific moment, consumers didn't even know they were allowed to demand a massive edge-to-edge glass screen, right?
Yeah.
People were perfectly happy with tiny little screens and physical plastic keyboards. But the second someone introduced the full glass screen, it instantly made every other piece of hardware on the market look totally obsolete.
That is a fantastic analogy.
Right. When Scenic dropped a river ship where you could just sit in your private room in your bathrobe with the glass down, smelling the fresh air as a German castle glides by, no affluent traveler ever wanted a fixed window again.
Of course not. Once you experience it, you can't go back.
The entire industry was just forced to scramble and imitate the design.
And mastering that specific puzzle gave Scenic an incredible degree of operational and engineering confidence.
I bet.
When you spend years learning how to maximize every single square millimeter of a river vessel, where your margins for error are, like we said, literally measured in centimeters against concrete walls, you develop a highly optimized pipeline for interior spatial design.
You learn how to use space.
Exactly. Scenic eventually built their own massive shipbuilding pipeline, utilizing MKM yachts over in Croatia.
Which really sets the stage for this rapid corporate expansion, because by 2013, they launched Emerald Cruises.
Right.
And the guide notes this was a very strategic move to capture a broader premium audience, effectively creating this two-tier ecosystem.
It was a smart play.
Yeah, you have Scenic Luxury Cruises and tours operating at the absolute ultra-premium, all-inclusive top tier, and then you have Emerald Cruises operating as this highly accessible premium brand.
Yeah.
But mastering the rivers was clearly just the prologue for Moroney, because in January 2016, he announces the ocean pivot.
And the 2016 announcement is pivotal specifically because of the terminology Moroney uses.
He didn't just call it a cruise ship.
No, he explicitly doesn't announce that Scenic is building a cruise ship. And he also refuses to call it an expedition ship. He coins an entirely new classification, which he calls the Discovery Yacht.
The nomenclature really matters here. Why avoid the standard industry terms?
Because conventional terminology carried all this baggage that just didn't fit his blueprint.
What kind of baggage?
Well, if you say cruise ship, the consumer immediately pictures a massive floating resort in the Caribbean with like 3,000 people, water slides, buffets, and absolutely zero capability to navigate sea ice.
Right, a floating mall.
Exactly. But if you say expedition ship, the consumer pictures this rugged, stripped-down scientific vessel.
Like a research boat.
Yeah. I mean, it might survive the Arctic, but the food is probably cafeteria style and the beds are essentially just bunks.
Not exactly 6-star.
No. Moroney's vision required a vessel that possessed the lethal capability of a military icebreaker, but the interior refinement of a top-tier luxury hotel.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at the actual specifications of the ships built to fulfill this Discovery Yacht vision, specifically the Scenic Eclipse, which launched in 2019, and her sister ship, the Scenic Eclipse II, which arrived in 2023, the juxtaposition is just staggering.
It is wild to look at the specs side by side.
It is quite literally like taking a heavy-duty icebreaker designed to smash through frozen oceans and wrapping the entire interior in cashmere and fine leather.
The numbers provided in Yvonne's guide paint a very clear picture of this duality. Let's break down the physical footprint.
Let's do it.
Both the Eclipse and the Eclipse II, though, are 168 meters long, and they have a gross tonnage of 17,545.
Let's pause on gross tonnage for a second.
Sure.
Because that term gets thrown around in maritime discussions constantly, and I feel like it's deeply misunderstood by the general public. People just assume gross tonnage refers to how much the ship physically weighs, like a displacement measurement.
Yeah, that is by far the most common misconception. Gross tonnage actually has absolutely nothing to do with weight.
Okay, so what is it?
It is a standardized measurement of the ship's total internal enclosed volume.
Volume, not weight.
Exactly. It calculates how much empty, usable space exists inside the steel hull and the superstructure. So when we say the Scenic Eclipse is 17,545 gross tons, we are talking about a massive amount of internal spatial volume.
And here is where that volume metric becomes totally mind-bending to me. They have all that space, but they cap the maximum guest capacity at just 228 people.
Which is incredibly low.
It's absurd. To put that in perspective, if a mainstream budget cruise line built a hull with 17,000 gross tons of volume, they would easily pack 500 to 600 passengers inside that thing just to maximize ticket revenue.
Oh, without a doubt.
But Scenic is putting only 228 guests into 114 suites.
Which results in a gross tonnage to passenger ratio of roughly 76.
Is that high?
It's astronomical. In the mainstream cruise industry, a ratio of 30 is considered reasonably spacious.
Wow.
Yeah. So a ratio of 76 means you have these soaring ceiling heights in the lounges, incredibly wide corridors, massive spa facilities, and suites that feel like standalone luxury apartments rather than ship cabins.
And it isn't just the space-to-guest ratio either, it's the human capital on board.
Yes, the staffing.
For those 228 guests, the ship carries a crew of 192.
Right.
That is a crew-to-guest ratio of 1 to 1.2. That is almost one staff member for every single passenger on board.
And that ratio is really the absolute gold standard for ultra-luxury service because it fundamentally changes how the crew operates on a daily basis.
Because they aren't overworked.
Exactly. They aren't rushing to flip tables in a dining room or clean 40 rooms on a super tight schedule. They actually have the bandwidth to anticipate your needs before you even articulate them.
The pedigree of these vessels is also heavily emphasized in the guide. The Scenic Eclipse was officially christened in New York by Dame Helen Mirren.
Which is very glamorous.
Very.
Yeah.
And the Scenic Eclipse II was christened by Dr. Kathy Sullivan, who is a NASA scientist and a renowned oceanographer.
Fitting for an expedition ship.
Totally. And the guide even gives us a look at the future, mentioning the Scenic Icon, which is arriving in April 2028.
Yeah, the next generation.
Yeah, the Icon will push the envelope even further. It's expanding to 205 meters in length and carrying 270 guests. But, all of the cashmere, the high ceilings, and the celebrity godmothers mean absolutely nothing if the ship sinks in the Weddell Sea.
That is the harsh reality.
Right. So we have to talk about the hardware beneath the waterline.
The physical survival systems. The guide specifically notes that these ships are built with a Polar Class 6 ice-strengthened hull.
Let's really break down what Polar Class 6 actually means in practical terms, because I feel like an ice-strengthened hull isn't just, a regular ship with a thicker coat of paint.
No, not at all. It's a massive structural difference. The Polar Class system is this highly regulated international standard that governs any vessels operating in ice-covered waters.
Okay.
PC6 certification means the ship is legally and structurally capable of summer and autumn operation in medium first-year ice, which may also include older ice inclusions.
So actual chunks of solid ice.
Yes. And to achieve this, the naval architects have to completely reimagine the bow and the waterline of the ship. The steel plating at the ice belt, which is the area of the hull that actively makes contact with the frozen ocean, is significantly thicker than standard maritime steel.
Like armor.
Basically. And furthermore, the internal skeleton of the ship, the actual framing holding that heavy steel in place, is constructed much, much closer together.
To absorb the shock.
Exactly. It has to distribute the massive kinetic impact of repeatedly striking large ice blocks.
It is effectively armor plating. And alongside the hull, the guide details an armada of 12 Zodiacs on board for rapid shore landing.
Which you need for expeditions.
For sure. But the two pieces of engineering that are truly revolutionary, at least in the context of passenger comfort, are the stabilizers and the dynamic positioning system.
Oh, absolutely. Let's examine the stabilizers first, because the guide points out that these ships utilize oversized zero-speed stabilizer fins that are fully 50% larger than the standard fins installed on comparable vessels.
Now, I understand the basic physics of a standard ship stabilizer.
Right.
They are these fins that deploy from the sides of the hull under the waterline. And much like the wings of an airplane generate lift as air moves over them, the forward momentum of the ship pushes water over the stabilizer fins, right?
Exactly, creating hydrodynamic lift.
Right, creating lift that keeps the ship from rolling side to side. But the guide uses the phrase zero speed.
Yes.
How can a fin stabilize a ship if the ship isn't moving forward to create that hydrodynamic lift? That doesn't make sense to me.
That is the crucial engineering distinction here. A standard stabilizer is entirely dependent on forward velocity.
Right.
If a standard cruise ship stops its engines, say to allow passengers to view a pod of humpback whales, the water literally stops flowing over the fins.
The lift disappears.
The lift dissipates completely, and the ship is suddenly at the complete mercy of the ocean swells. And in places like the Drake Passage, that's the body of water between South America and Antarctica, those swells can easily reach 10 to 15 meters.
That is terrifying.
If a ship is sitting still in the Drake, without active stabilization, it will roll violently.
Which immediately ruins the entire six-star illusion. You can't pour top-shelf champagne if the bottle is literally flying across the dining room.
Exactly. The problem zero-speed stabilizers solve. Instead of relying on passive hydrodynamic lift from forward motion, These zero-speed stabilizers are actively powered.
Oh, like motors inside them.
Yes, they act like massive aquatic paddles. Even when the ship is sitting perfectly still at 0 knots, internal hydraulic systems are actively rotating and articulating these massive fins, physically pushing against the water to counteract the roll of the waves.
That is incredible engineering.
It really is.
Yeah.
And by making them 50% larger than standard, Scenic ensured they have the sheer surface area required to fight those brutal polar ocean swells. Luxury out here is not defined merely by the thread count of the linens. Luxury is stability.
I love that.
Luxury is the complete absence of seasickness.
That brings us to the second piece of invisible luxury on board, the dynamic positioning system.
Yes. Dynamic positioning, or DP, is this intensely complex computer-controlled system that allows a ship to maintain its exact position and heading completely automatically.
Without dropping an anchor.
Right. It utilizes a highly complex network of GPS sensors, wind sensors, and gyro compasses. The central computer takes all of that live environmental data like the exact speed of the wind, the direction of the surface current, the wave height, and it automatically fires the ship's azipods and bow thrusters in microscopic bursts to hold the vessel exactly on a specific set of coordinates.
My immediate thought when reading that is, why go through all that computational trouble?
Right, it sounds over-engineered.
Yeah. Ships have used heavy steel anchors on chains for thousands of years. It works. Why is dynamic positioning framed as a luxury feature in this guide?
Because of the modern reality of environmental protection.
Ah, okay.
When you drop a multi-ton steel anchor and hundreds of meters of heavy iron chain onto the ocean floor, it drags.
Yeah.
If you are anchoring in a pristine Caribbean coral reef or a super fragile Antarctic seabed ecosystem, that chain acts exactly like a wrecking ball, just obliterating centuries of slow biological growth in a matter of seconds.
That's heartbreaking to even think about.
It is. Consequently, local governments and international environmental treaties have outright banned anchoring in many of the most spectacular, untouched destinations on Earth.
Ah, so if you only have a traditional anchor, you are legally barred from even entering the bay.
Correct. You have to anchor miles offshore in unprotected deep waters. But with dynamic positioning, the ship basically hovers over the seabed without ever physically touching it.
Like a drone.
Exactly like a drone. It satisfies the absolute strictest environmental regulations, which grants the ship legal access to highly restricted, pristine coves. So the defining metric of modern luxury travel isn't just comfort anymore, it is access.
Access is the absolute perfect word to bridge us into the next topic, because while the ship itself can get you into a protected bay, the true draw of the Discovery Yacht, the thing everyone talks about, is how it gets you off the deck and deep into the actual environment.
Oh, yeah.
And that means we have to talk about the toys.
The aviation and submersible equipment.
The toys!
These are undoubtedly the most aggressively marketed and frankly heavily scrutinized features of the entire Scenic fleet.
The guide breaks down the exact hardware for us. Every Discovery Yacht carries 2 Airbus H130 T2 helicopters.
Not cheap.
Not at all. Each helicopter is capable of carrying 6 guests alongside the pilot. Then you have the custom-built submarines.
Which are just phenomenal.
Yeah, the Scenic Eclipse carries the Scenic Neptune, which is capable of diving to a depth of 305 meters with 6 guests.
That's almost 1,000 feet down.
Insane. And the Eclipse 2 features an upgraded model, the Neptune 2, which has a shallower max depth of 200 meters, but it expands the capacity to 8 guests. They even carry a remotely operated vehicle, like an ROV camera drone, that can dive way down into the abyss and beam a live, high-definition video feed right back to the screens inside the ship's theater.
We really need to appreciate the sheer mechanical nightmare of storing and operating this specific equipment on a maritime vessel.
I can't imagine it's easy.
It's incredibly difficult. You cannot simply land a multi-million-dollar Airbus helicopter on the top deck, tie it down with a rope, and sail into a polar hurricane.
Assault alone would eat it alive.
Salt water and freezing spray will destroy the avionics in days.
So they have to store them inside the ship.
Yes. The ships are built with these massive internal climate-controlled hangars.
Wow.
And this requires a massive sacrifice of internal volume that, could have easily been used for more revenue-generating passenger suites.
Right, they gave up cabins for the hangars.
Exactly. And when it is time to fly, the crew must utilize specialized rail systems to physically move the helicopters from the internal hangars out onto the helipads, all while the ship might be pitching in the ocean.
That sounds intense.
And the same applies to the submarine. Launching a submersible weighing several tons into freezing, unpredictable waters requires incredibly robust overhead crane systems and a team of highly specialized technical staff.
Which leads us directly into the financial reality of these toys. And I have to be honest, this is where I experienced a significant moment of pushback while reading the source material.
The pricing structure.
Yes,
Well,
because the overarching marketing message of Scenic is that this is a fully all-inclusive six-star experience.
right.
But the guide is extremely explicit about this. These helicopter flights and submarine dives are not included in the base fare.
They are not.
If you want to dive or if you want to fly, you are paying a hefty supplemental fee. My consumer instinct immediately flags that as a bait and switch.
I hear that criticism a lot.
If I am paying tens of thousands of dollars for a supposedly all-inclusive ticket, why am I pulling out my credit card for the absolute flagship features that are painted on the side of the brochure?
What's fascinating here is that the initial consumer outrage usually evaporates entirely once you actually analyze the severe regulatory landscape and the logistical economics.
Okay, color me intrigued.
It is very easy to just label it a hidden fee and be mad about it. But from an operational standpoint, unbundling the cost of the helicopters and the submarine is actually the only equitable way to structure the pricing for the entire passenger base globally.
Consider my skepticism intact. Walk me through the economics of why it's fair.
It comes down to international aviation and maritime law. The guide provides a really comprehensive list of geographic locations where the operation of these specific toys is outright banned by local governments.
They ban them.
Completely. Let's look at the helicopters first. As of 2026, you are legally prohibited from flying the ship's helicopters in Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Faroe Islands, Finland, Greenland, Ireland, Morocco, the Netherlands, Svalbard, Panama, the Solomon Islands, South Georgia, and the United Kingdom.
That is a staggering list. That covers massive portions of the ship's global itineraries.
It does. And furthermore, the submarine faces its own entirely separate matrix of bans.
Really? Where can't you use the sub?
You cannot legally launch the submarine in Europe, the Mediterranean, New Zealand, large sections of Australia, Svalbard, or even on certain highly specific routes in East Antarctica.
Okay, the regulatory picture is definitely coming into focus for me.
Now, I want you to put yourself in the position of the pricing actuary for Scenic. Imagine you are a passenger who has booked a 3-week itinerary cruising the coast of the United Kingdom and Ireland, ending in the Netherlands.
Sounds like a great trip.
It is, but by law, the helicopters cannot take off in any of those jurisdictions. They will remain locked inside the hangar for the entire 21 days.
Right.
If Scenic operated under a purely bundled pricing model, they would have to take the massive operational costs of the aviation fuel, the helicopter pilot salaries, the submarine maintenance, and the immense insurance premiums, and average that huge cost into the base ticket price of every single guest globally.
Oh, I see the problem.
Yeah.
The passenger cruising in the Mediterranean would be paying an artificially inflated ticket price, literally thousands of dollars extra, to subsidize the cost of equipment that is legally bolted to the deck for their entire vacation.
Exactly. It would be fundamentally unfair to the vast majority of the passenger base.
That makes total sense.
So the only logical business model is to charge for the equipment purely on an a la carte basis, which is heavily dependent on weather conditions, ice density, and the specific laws of the local jurisdiction.
Okay, that completely flips my perspective on the pricing model. It isn't a bait and switch at all. It's actually a firewall protecting guests from paying for services they can't legally access. But let's look at the inverse scenario. When the weather is perfect and the local laws do permit the operation, we have to consider how transformative this equipment is for the traveler.
Oh, it changes everything.
Right. Imagine the standard process of taking a land-based helicopter tour on a normal vacation. You have to wake up super early at your hotel, you take a shuttle bus for an hour to some regional airport, you sit through a boring safety briefing in a strip mall, you fly out over the landscape, and then you fly all the way back just to catch another shuttle bus back to the hotel.
It takes an entire day just to get 30 minutes of airtime.
The friction of the logistics totally dilutes the actual experience.
It does.
Now imagine you are on the Scenic Eclipse. The dynamic positioning system is holding the ship perfectly steady at the very foot of a towering Antarctic glacier. You finish your morning espresso in your suite, you walk down the corridor, step out onto the deck, and within minutes the helicopter lifts off directly into the ice field.
No shuttle bus.
No shuttle bus. It is instantaneous aerial perspective exactly where the geography demands it most.
And the access it grants is just unprecedented. In regions like the remote fjords of Arctic Norway, the helicopter can transport guests to these elevated headlands or inland glaciers that are completely inaccessible by foot from the shoreline.
You literally couldn't get there any other way.
You couldn't.
Ugh.
And the submarine offers the exact same paradigm shift. You aren't just looking at the flat surface of the polar ocean from the deck. You are descending hundreds of meters to view the biological architecture of the icebergs from underneath.
Which is just a totally different world.
It is a level of multi-dimensional destination immersion that traditional cruise ships simply cannot replicate.
So having firmly established the reality of the toys and exactly why they require a supplemental fee, we really need to transition to the core of the ship itself.
The hotel operation.
Exactly, because once you step out of that helicopter and walk back into the climate-controlled hull, your wallet effectively ceases to exist.
Completely.
And the guide goes into extreme detail regarding the inclusions. The psychology behind how they have engineered this 6-star ecosystem is just brilliant to me.
It is a masterclass in eliminating friction. Let's start with the private accommodations.
Let's do it.
The guide confirms that every single one of the 114 rooms is a balcony suite.
Every single one.
Yes, there is no such thing as an interior windowless cabin on a Discovery Yacht.
The scale of the entry-level product is what really caught my attention. The absolute lowest tier, like the cheapest ticket you can possibly purchase to get on the ship, is called the Veranda Suite.
Right.
And it is 32 square meters, which translates to roughly 344 square feet.
For a maritime environment, an entry-level room of that size is vast.
It's huge. It includes a private balcony, a dedicated sleep zone, and a separate lounge area. And from that baseline, the accommodations scale up across 14 distinct classifications.
It goes up fast.
Yeah, you have spa suites that feature massive vitality tubs and offer direct specialized access to the Senses Spa complex. You have sky suites, grand suites, and then you reach the absolute apex of the ship.
The penthouse.
The 2-bedroom penthouse suite. It occupies 247 square meters.
Unbelievable.
That is over 2,600 square feet of private space. It includes a 60 square meter wraparound terrace. That is bigger than most apartments in New York City.
Oh, by far. And here is the great equalizer within that entire tiered system. Regardless of whether you are occupying the 32 square meter veranda or the sprawling 2-bedroom penthouse, every single guest receives dedicated butler service.
Everyone gets a butler.
Everyone. All gratuities for every single crew member are permanently baked into the base fare. All water sports equipment deployed from the marina at the back of the ship, the kayaks, the stand-up paddle boards, the specialized aquaquad bikes are entirely complimentary.
But the dining program is where the logistical math of this ship just breaks my brain completely.
It's a massive undertaking.
The guide details that the ship features up to 10 distinct dining experiences and 9 bars and lounges.
Let's really consider the architectural and operational reality of that statement. Fitting 10 distinct culinary venues into a vessel that is only 168 meters long is an astonishing feat of spatial engineering.
Right, because it's not just about building 10 dining rooms with tables and chairs, it's about the hidden infrastructure required to support them.
The galleys.
Exactly, you need separate galley spaces. The fine French dining venue requires entirely different prep stations, different ventilation, and different cooking equipment than the Japanese teppanyaki grill or the Mediterranean restaurant.
Completely different setups.
And think about the provisioning logistics. You cannot just run to a local farmer's market to buy fresh Wagyu beef, artisanal cheeses, or fresh produce when you are 3 weeks deep into an East Antarctica itinerary.
Yo, the nearest grocery store is 1,000 miles away.
Exactly. The ship must dedicate massive, hidden internal volumes purely to specialized freezer holds and refrigeration units just to keep that food pristine for months at a time.
And they manage this immense complexity without ever passing the friction onto the guest. The guide explicitly states there are no supplemental charges for any of these dining venues. Furthermore, they operate on an open seating policy.
Meaning you don't have an assigned table with strangers, you don't have a fixed dining time like 6 p.m. or 8 p.m., and for the vast majority of the venues, you don't even need to make a reservation. You simply walk in when you are hungry.
It's pure freedom.
And the beverage program follows the exact same philosophy. They aren't just pouring some generic, cheap house wine during dinner service to save money. The inclusions cover premium vintage wines, top-shelf spirits, complex cocktails, and high-end champagne, available continuously throughout the day and night in any of the 9 lounges.
It's quite the setup.
So what does this all mean? When you synthesize all of these data points, it reveals a fascinating dual-layered social structure on board the ship.
How do you mean?
Well, on one level, it is aggressively egalitarian. Every single passenger has a private balcony. Every passenger has a butler unpacking their luggage. Every passenger has unrestricted access to the same 10 restaurants and the same top-shelf champagne without ever seeing a bill.
Right. The baseline is incredibly high.
But on the other level, if you possess the financial leverage, the scalability of your personal private space is virtually limitless. You can essentially purchase a luxury suburban home right on the bow of the ship if you have the cash.
That egalitarian access to the soft product, the food, the drinks, the service, strikes at the very core of the fully all-inclusive psychological model.
Yeah, the psychology of it.
The greatest enemy of relaxation in traditional luxury travel is microtransaction fatigue.
Oh, I hate that.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
In the standard cruise model, you pay a substantial sum for your initial ticket, but the moment you step on board, the nickel and diming begins.
Immediately.
You want a specialty coffee, sign a receipt. You want a premium cocktail instead of the cheap well liquor. Yeah. Hand over your cruise card. You want to eat at the steakhouse instead of the loud main dining room. Pay a cover charge.
It turns every enjoyable moment into a subtle, stressful financial calculation.
Precisely. It constantly reminds your brain that you are engaged in an active financial transaction.
You never fully relax.
Exactly. By utterly eliminating the microtransactions, Scenic creates a psychological safe zone where the guest can entirely disengage from financial anxiety.
That makes total sense.
And when you pair that friction-free environment with the 1 to 1.2 crew-to-guest ratio we talked about, the entire nature of the service transforms.
Because the crew isn't selling to you.
Right. The crew is no longer incentivized to upsell you on a wine package or a specialty dining reservation to make a commission. The service stops feeling transactional and begins to feel genuinely intuitive. They are no longer salesmen. They are purely hosts.
But I think we have to acknowledge a hard truth here. Having 10 incredible restaurants, a private butler, and limitless champagne is a spectacular experience, obviously. But you could easily achieve that exact same experience by booking a suite at a 5-star hotel in Paris or Tokyo.
That is very true.
The true, irreplaceable value of the Discovery Yacht is not the champagne. It is where the ship actually takes you while you are drinking it.
The geographical footprint is the ultimate differentiator.
Without a doubt.
The guide maps out the 2026 itineraries for both vessels, and the scope is just staggering. Across the year, they will visit over 350 ports across 49 countries, touching all 7 continents.
Incredible.
And when you analyze the routing, you see the ships operating under 2 very distinct identities depending on the season.
Let's break down those distinct geographic programs. Because the signature offering, the absolute pinnacle of their operational capability, is the Polar Expedition.
Yes. The Scenic Eclipse handles the classic Antarctic Peninsula routes, navigating the notorious Drake Passage, and also manages the high Arctic, pushing way up into Svalbard, Greenland, and Iceland.
Right.
But the guide places specific emphasis on the East Antarctica and Ross Sea routes, which operate out of New Zealand and Australia.
We really need to highlight why the Ross Sea is functionally different from a standard Antarctic cruise. Because most people who go to Antarctica depart from the southern tip of South America, usually a town called Ushuaia in Argentina.
Right, the standard peninsula route.
Yeah, it takes about 2 days to cross the Drake Passage, and then boom, you were looking at penguins.
The Ross Sea and East Antarctica are entirely different beasts.
How so?
They are exponentially more remote. Departing from New Zealand means you are facing days and days of open ocean transit across some of the most violent, unpredictable waters on the globe before you even see the ice shelf.
It's just massive, empty ocean.
Yes. And in those environments, you are fundamentally detached from any traditional human infrastructure or rapid rescue capabilities.
You're truly on your own out there.
Exactly. When the ship is in the Ross Sea, it is operating purely as a high-tech survival pod. The heavy steel of the Polar Class 6 hull and those zero-speed stabilizers we discussed are not luxury features in that specific environment. They are absolute necessities for survival.
Right, to keep the ship from capsizing or being crushed.
And helicopters become critical for survival too, scouting safe passage through shifting pack ice ahead of the ship.
But the brilliance of the design is that the survival pod is basically a chameleon. Because when spring and autumn arrive, the ships migrate. They transition into their Mediterranean and Northern Europe circuits.
This is where it gets really clever.
Yeah. And this is where the physical dimensions of the hull, that 168-meter length, transition from a survival necessity into a massive logistical advantage.
Exactly. When the Discovery Yacht enters the Mediterranean, it discards the survival pod identity entirely and functions as a mega yacht.
Right, because of the size.
Because the modern cruising industry has a massive scale problem right now.
Ships are just getting too big.
They are huge. The new mainstream mega ships carry upwards of 5,000 to 6,000 passengers and are over 300 meters long. They are so massive that they physically cannot fit into historical harbors anymore.
So where do they go?
They are relegated to massive industrial concrete cruise terminals, located sometimes miles away from the actual destinations.
Yeah, you dock at this ugly industrial container port and have to spend an hour on a crowded bus just to see the city center.
But the Scenic Eclipse is only 168 meters long. It operates on the scale of a billionaire's private yacht.
It can just slide right in.
It can completely bypass the industrial terminals. It can sail directly into the tight, shallow harbors of the Greek Aegean Islands. It can dock overnight right in the heart of Monte Carlo or Venice, allowing guests to simply walk off the ramp directly into the historical centers.
And beyond the Mediterranean, the guide outlines what they call warm water expeditions.
Right, the tropical routes.
These routes cover the Caribbean, the rugged Kimberley coast in Western Australia, the Indonesian archipelago, the depths of the Amazon River, the Patagonian fjords, and the coastlines of Japan. The juxtaposition of what this crew and this machine are asked to do over the course of 12 months is wild.
It's a huge operational stretch.
Just think about the pivot required. 1 month, the crew is wearing tropical uniforms, deploying a submarine into a warm, sunlit Caribbean coral reef, and setting up the aquaquad bikes off the marina deck.
Serving frozen cocktails.
Exactly. And then, a few months later, that exact same ship with the exact same crew is locked in a battle with crushing Polar Class 6 ice in the Arctic Circle while the helicopter pilots scout for polar bears.
It is the ultimate maritime multi-tool.
It really is.
But, it is an incredibly capable multi-tool, but it is vital to recognize that Scenic is not operating in a vacuum here.
Right, they have rivals.
They do. They are not the only player competing in the ultra-luxury expedition space. To truly understand the value proposition of Scenic in 2026, we have to look at the competitive matrix provided in the source document.
Because a traveler operating at this extreme price point definitely has options.
This raises an important question. When an affluent traveler is staring at this incredibly complex matrix of high-end options, who is the Scenic Discovery Yacht actually built for?
Well, let's pull back the curtain and look at the neighbors first.
Oh, dear.
The guide identifies 4 primary competitors in this specific echelon of travel: Seabourn, Silversea, Viking Expeditions, and Sea Dream Yacht Club. Let's start by looking at Seabourn.
Seabourn offers a genuinely comparable product in the expedition space. They operate 2 purpose-built expedition vessels, the Venture and the Pursuit.
Okay.
Like Scenic, they are fully all-inclusive, and they hold the exact same Polar Class 6 certification. They also carry submarines on board.
So where's the point of differentiation? If the hardware is that similar, why pick one over the other?
It comes down to scale and brand heritage. Seabourn's expedition ships carry slightly more guests, ranging from 264 up to 600 depending on the vessel.
It's a bit more crowded.
A bit, yes. But their strongest differentiator is their deeply entrenched culinary legacy. Seabourn has a very long-standing partnership with chef Thomas Keller, offering his restaurants on board with no supplemental charge.
Oh, that's a huge draw for foodies.
It is. They lean heavily on their established, classic, luxury country club atmosphere.
Okay, then you have Silversea, which the guide positions as having the absolute broadest destination and expedition range of any luxury line globally.
Silversea is a massive powerhouse in this sector. Their fleet includes ships carrying anywhere from a very intimate 100 guests up to over 700.
A huge range.
Yeah. And the crucial piece of hardware in their fleet is the Silver Endeavour. The guide specifically notes that the Endeavour is widely considered the most ice-capable passenger vessel currently in service anywhere in the world. It is built to conquer the absolute most extreme polar environments, including that brutal raw sea route we discussed earlier.
But there is a catch regarding the toys with Silversea, right?
Yes, there is. The primary distinction is that Silversea has largely opted out of the aviation and submersible arms race.
Ah, so no helicopters.
Right. They do not include helicopters or submarines on the vast majority of their vessels, choosing instead to focus entirely on really robust shore landings and high-level expedition guiding.
Okay, so if the aerial perspective of a helicopter is an absolute non-negotiable for you, you are naturally pushed toward scenic or seaborne.
Exactly.
Now, what about Viking expeditions? Because Viking was the company Moroney originally chartered from, and now they are direct competitors on the oceans.
Viking takes a fundamentally different philosophical approach to the expedition market.
How so?
Well, their ships, the Viking Octantis and Viking Polaris, carry 378 guests, making them quite a bit larger than Scenic. They do feature submarines on the Octantis. However, Viking's entire brand identity is intensely focused on scientific education rather than pure, unadulterated indulgence.
How does that actually manifest on the ship, like in the design?
It dictates the architecture completely. Instead of dedicating space to 10 different restaurants or massive spa complexes, Viking built the Ola.
What's the Ola?
It's a stunning panoramic auditorium designed specifically for high-level academic lectures. And they carry a massive expedition team of over 25 scientists and experts per voyage.
That's a huge academic focus, and the pricing model is different as well, right?
Correct. Viking is generally more financially accessible at the entry point, but it operates on what we call a value-inclusive rather than a fully all-inclusive model.
What's the difference?
The base fare covers a lot, but gratuities are charged as a separate daily fee. And, if you want premium top-shelf spirits outside of mealtimes, you are paying extra for those.
Got it. And finally, the guide lists Sea Dream Yacht Club, which, looking at their profile, honestly sounds like it belongs in a completely different conversation.
It is a completely different operational model, but they do compete for the exact same affluent traveler.
Right.
Sea Dream is built for the guests seeking the absolute most intimate, genuinely yacht-like atmosphere possible. Their vessels carry a maximum of just 112 guests.
That is tiny.
It is. The crew-to-guest ratio is practically 1-to-1. The service is incredibly bespoke, and it is fully all-inclusive.
But they don't do ice.
Not at all. They possess absolutely zero polar expedition capability.
They aren't smashing through glaciers.
No, Sea Dream operates exclusively in warm water environments, the Caribbean, the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Their entire value proposition is utilizing their tiny size to access boutique, hidden harbor ports that even Scenic's 168-meter ships might struggle to enter.
So synthesizing all of this, the guide does a really beautiful job in its best suited for section. It breaks down the exact psychological profile of the scenic guest.
It does. Scenic is really engineered for the traveler who prioritizes the absolute highest levels of technological sophistication and engineering capability.
The tech lovers.
Yeah. And it is specifically designed for guests who demand a purely frictionless, fully all-inclusive financial model where the premium spirits flow freely and the concept of signing a bill is completely eradicated from the experience.
It is also the natural progression for river cruise veterans. The guide points out that travelers who have spent years sailing on scenic spaceships in Europe already trust the brand's operational competence, and this provides them a familiar gateway to transition into deep ocean exploration.
Furthermore, it is the only choice for couples who view a private balcony as an absolute non-negotiable requirement, because Scenic's all-balcony architecture offers no lesser alternative.
You can't book a cheap room without one.
Exactly. But the most defining characteristic is the hardware. Scenic is for the guest, whose chosen itinerary actually permits the use of the aviation equipment, and who views the ability to summon a helicopter from the deck of their ship as a transformative, essential element of their exploration.
Which means we also need to be brutally honest about who this ship is not for.
That's equally important.
Right. If you are listening to this and your ideal vacation is a traditional sun-drenched cruise through the Caribbean with a massive focus on legacy culinary partnerships, and you have absolutely zero interest in looking at an iceberg or climbing into a submarine, a line like Seabourn or Silversea might align better with your priorities.
Very true.
Or if your goal is a highly social, adults-only 100-person yacht party anchored off the coast of St. Bart's, Scenic's heavily equipped 228-guest expedition vessel is entirely the wrong tool for the job. You don't buy a military-grade icebreaker to go day drinking in the Bahamas.
Exactly. The Discovery Yacht is a highly specialized piece of machinery designed to execute a highly specific, dual-purpose style of travel. It is a vessel of extremes.
Which really brings us to the conclusion of this incredibly dense, fascinating deep dive. We have traced a remarkable 40-year corporate evolution here.
It's been quite the journey.
We started with Glen Moroney driving a single, dusty coach bus along an Australian highway in 1986. We explored how he mitigated risk by chartering riverboats, how he broke the physical constraints of European locks by inventing the internal balcony river suite, and how he translated that spatial mastery into the ocean.
A masterclass in scaling a business.
All the way to 2026, where the company now operates a fleet of 6-star submarine-equipped Discovery Yachts capable of hovering over fragile coral reefs using GPS thrusters and breaking through medium first-year polar ice while serving limitless champagne.
It is a remarkable testament to the power of patience in business.
It really is.
Observing the market, cataloging the friction points of your competitors, waiting for the precise technological moment, and then aggressively over-engineering a proprietary solution.
I really want to thank you for coming along on this journey with us today. Navigating the intricate realities of ultra-luxury travel can feel like trying to decipher an arcane language sometimes,
It can be very overwhelming.
especially when you have to untangle the complex international regulations regarding airspace, understand the nuanced economics of all-inclusive pricing versus unbundled features, and comprehend the sheer physics of what keeps a ship stable in the Drake Passage. We hope this thorough breakdown of Yvonne Jr. Blanchette's guide helped demystify the incredible, highly regulated world of the Discovery Yachts.
But before we sign off, there is a broader, almost philosophical point that the existence of this entire industry brings to the surface.
Oh, lay it on me.
As vessels like the Scenic Eclipse continue to evolve, they are making the most lethal, untouched, and geographically remote corners of the Earth completely accessible.
Right.
And they are making them accessible not through endurance, but through supreme comfort while you sit in a temperature-controlled suite. It forces us to ask a profound question. What happens to the human concept of exploration when the inherent struggle to survive the elements is entirely engineered away?
That's a deep question.
When the absolute edge of the map simply becomes another comfortable luxury destination, where do we look next to find the truly unknown?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? A century ago, Shackleton fought the crushing pack ice just to stay alive. Today, we use computerized zero-speed stabilizers to ensure our martinis don't spill while we watch that same ice float by through floor-to-ceiling glass. It is a brave, wildly engineered new world out there. Thanks for exploring it with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.